Okay. I just want to welcome everyone to our panel today. I'm broadcasting live from the AOS studio in downtown New Orleans. We want to thank you for joining us this Friday. We have an esteemed panel here of educators from our local universities, as well as design professionals that work within that industry. We started these discussions about 4 months ago as just a small group of industry folks getting together to talk about, what is the meaning of place and how will we see it affected by COVID-19 crisis. There was so much feedback from our initial panel that we have since propelled this into a series, and we also discussed hospitality, the arts and entertainment industry. And now this month, appropriate with the start of our school semester, we're going to talk about education. I want to thank everyone here because I know it's been juggling many balls for the last couple of months. So thank you for taking an hour out of your time to help share your plans and your perspective on what higher education looks like within our industry. I want to start with introductions so you get a sense of who is on our panel today. And I want to start with Ralph Johnson.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, my name is Ralph Johnson, Vice President for Business and Finance and Chief Financial Officer for Dillard University in New Orleans. I have responsibility for a lot of the administrative functions here at the university, financial statements, facilities planning, also human resources, auxiliary services, and also, payroll and those related kind of administrative functions. So excited to be on the panel and looking forward to the discussion today.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we'll turn it over to Dr. John Nicklow.
Good morning, everyone. John Nicklow, President of the University of New Orleans. I'm entering my 5th year as president. Our university is the only public research university in the metro area. We have about 8,500 undergraduate and graduate students. And I'm a civil engineer by profession.
Very nice. Dr. Kristine Strickland, share a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Kristine Strickland, Chancellor at Fletcher Technical Community College, which is located in the Houma Thibodeau region of the state. Have been in higher education for many, many years, too many to say, but started my career in private university before moving over to community college. And Fletcher represents about 6,000 students in the Bayou region, everything from adult basic education and English as a second language education, all the way through workforce, continuing education, and higher education through the associate's degree. So glad to be with everyone today.
Thank you. Greg LaCour.
Greg LaCour, Director of Campus Planning at LSU. I've been here for 2 years, a little over 2 years. I graduated from LSU in '82 in architecture, had a full career with Gensler Architectural Firm in Houston, an international firm. Retired as a principal to come back to be the Director of Campus Planning at LSU. And glad to be here.
Making full circle and your second appearance on our panel. Thank you very much. And last but not least, a person who is very well versed in designing education spaces, David Wagner.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me, an architect, in this panel. I think 2 key words here are resiliency and education. We've done, 40, 50 different schools, including work currently in Beijing, our largest work now. And resiliency, I think that word we've been active in for now 15 years, directly with the water plan and the Rebuild by Design work and the NDR National Disaster Resilience Competition. So those 2 terms come together, education and being resilient. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all again for being here. One last housekeeping note. I want to thank all of our participants who are tuning in virtually. We do have a chat feature, and if you have a question for one of our panelists, please feel free to type it into the chat and list the panelists who you would like the question directed to. We will get to a few of those at the end of the hour. So diving in, thank you, David. That was a wonderful talk. Resiliency is definitely the key word, and flexibility, as all of our educators are having to devise their plans for this upcoming semester. And a couple of other few words that come to mind are innovation, creativity, having to, reinvention. John, I wanted to start with you. Looking at sort of your background and expertise, you have extensive knowledge in enrollment management, student success initiatives, academic program innovation. What will you see the role of the campus be in this upcoming semester in fostering community, enabling learning and research, and supporting students moving forward?
I think whether it's online or face-to-face, the campus center has to be alive and well for us to continue or maintain learning continuity. And I think that's what this is all about. That's why we're all interested in this, is making sure that meaningful learning continues and that students can continue to build their career portfolio. For UNO, it also means that our campus needs to be operational and innovative and ensure that our research continues, because our research is vital to developing state-of-the-art methods, techniques, and ideas. And we partner with folks from all over the region and the country to develop new research. And I think the role of the campus is to ensure that those continue in a vibrant way.
Excellent. Kristine, turning to you, as your team has, I'm sure, had to quickly adapt your learning models moving forward, do you have a specific plan in place for how you're going to continue to creatively engage students in this new learning environment, and what role will technology play?
Absolutely. So technology is playing a key role in a couple of different ways. We too have looked to go hybrid and online, and so we've added new platforms, and we've tried, initially, right, when everyone had to make the jump in the spring, it was kind of cobbled together using Canvas course rooms and Zoom meetings and Teams meetings, and we've kind of tried to level out what platforms we're going to be delivering our education from. So that's been really critical. But for us, one of the biggest challenges was with our technical programs and some of our courses that really do require hands-on education, our science labs, and trying to determine what was the availability of 3D software, virtual software for delivering labs. We have actually a presentation this afternoon by one of our faculty in the automotive sector, and how he has made some of his content to teach automotive courses virtual. And so it's really a new arena for us in a lot of different ways. We have also developed ways to deliver adult basic education virtually, which has really been sort of the gold standard has been in person. And so how we do that using the different platforms has been a real exercise in creativity and innovation for our faculty and for our staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the silver linings is maybe accessibility to a larger amount of education now that we've determined ways to deliver some of those programs that were seen as only in person before.
Absolutely. I would note too that we did some summer camp activities this summer where we were engaged in an energy camp with Shell and an astro camp with NASA. And what was fascinating is we've offered those camps before, but this year we took them virtual. And so initially, last year we might have had a reach of our region, maybe a few parishes outside of that. This year, both of our summer camps saw participation from 17 different states and Canada. So the reach was significant.
That's incredible. A great success story. Ralph, turning to you, I wanted to hear a little bit about, maybe walk us through sort of what the planning has been like for your teams in welcoming students back, and how do you ensure safety and make people feel comfortable coming back to the campus?
Sure, and similar to my colleagues at Fletcher and UNO, the team when this all started in March, it was a little, helter-skelter. We quickly had to convert our classes to online environment. But, over the summer and since that time, we started to sit down, well, actually virtually sit and have these meetings about what it would look like for us to return to campus. So it's like other colleges, we developed a return to campus plan that really kind of outlined what those steps would be, including if we had to return to a fully online mode, what are some of those milestone dates that we would be looking at to say, if we make it until this particular day, then these are the steps that we would take. These would be the kind of adjustments that we would have to make to room and board, as well too, if we got to that date and moving on further along into the semester. We're coming back. Actually, this week was the first week of classes, so we're testing out a lot of those methods now, and we're really starting to see a lot of buy-in, I think, from faculty, staff, and students. We're requiring everyone to wear a mask, as well too. We've got a schedule of disinfecting classrooms both before and then after the classes are held too. We spend a lot of time over the summer socially distancing not only our classrooms, but administrative buildings as well too, as I'm sure others have had, installing plexiglass where they where required at. And then, overall just trying to give faculty, staff, students a sense of, we're all in this together. And, if we want to continue this progress along, everybody's going to have to play their part in order to do so.
Absolutely. I think in how you ensure sort of that comfort level to your students and faculty is the key. Sounds like y'all are doing a great job at that. Greg, I wanted to turn to you and hear a little bit from your perspective. Obviously, you're being the director of campus planning. Is your team is sort of in charge of implementing any of that facility work that needs to happen to accommodate new protocol. Could you share a little bit about the planning that's gone in place from your team and maybe what you see further down the pipeline in the way education spaces are designed and developed? Greg, I think you're on mute.
Like Ralph said, all of the planning that has gone into coming to this point, starting in March, we were trying to figure out what to do. We had contacted consultants from around the country looking for someone who may have a few weeks more experience than we had. And as it turns out, we realized that we were quickly learning what we had to learn. And as things changed, we had to change. So everybody went online toward the end of last semester. And we had, I see Chris Pellegrin's here watching. We're working very closely with Chris and CSRS as they have stepped up to be a very important resource for us, for people, and helping us to put information together, put spreadsheets together. We provide some basic information, and they've taken it and have done a terrific job of helping us to do everything from putting signs out. We printed over 22,000 signs and stickers, keep to the right kind of things. And we had a whole lot of conversation along the way regarding those particular things. Part of the conversation early on was, do we need to have one-way corridors? And then as we moved forward, we still kept thinking that might be a possibility. Then we started realizing how hard that would be to implement for people to understand where to go in, where to come out. They can't take a left-hand turn when they come out of their classroom to go to the building right next door. Those sort of things, we realized that we would have much better success because our corridors are typically wide, 8 to 10 feet wide, to keep people to the right. So that became our theme throughout all of the campus, and that has been implemented by Chris and his team. The other interesting fact is that we couldn't find wipes. We want to have wipes for every student to be able to come in when they take a wipe, when they come into the classroom. We couldn't find them. We had to buy dry product, and we're putting the chemical in with the dry product, and we're actually creating our own wipes that way. And we're doing, it's like 500 gallons a week of sanitizer, 500,000 wipes a week that we have to produce and distribute, over 430 classrooms. And it was a tremendous effort, and it's changing all the time. We had freshmen on class welcome week this week. Classes start Monday. We're going to see how it goes. But we're actually anxious to see what's going to happen, because we know things will be shifting as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can now add chemist as another thing on your resume.
Right, exactly.
Very good. David, I wanted to turn to you. As you mentioned earlier, you're no stranger to resilient and sustainable design practices. Your research and planning had significant impact following Hurricane Katrina. And through sort of that work and research, although this is a different crisis, it's a crisis nonetheless. And I think some of those design practices could actually play a role here in sort of the future of education and how we deal with that. Is there anything you can share along those lines that may have some similarities here?
Well, after Katrina, everybody did the best they could for a while, and then we started to think about, well, what's the future? I think we're still at the point of doing the best we can. All the people I look at trying to do operations and maintenance and keep their schools alive. The step beyond we took, perversely depended upon workshops with a lot of people working together from different disciplines and all in one place. And to some extent, that's frustrated by the current way where we can't all be around the same table. I can look at my colleagues on this panel, but I can't be in the room with them. And there's something in the mind that transfers more easily in direct presence. But I think it's really trying to understand what the values are. So we have to use everything that happens in our lives as opportunities to make it better. And I think that, what are the lessons being learned and what are the priorities? Well, health becomes the highest priority here. And I think that, as in Katrina, safety became for us the highest priority. And so, underwriting all that in Katrina, and again, I think now is community. And, we talk about equity and these other very important things. But, our fear is we're going to lose our culture always. And a lot of the culture is within the schools and within the meetings and the dorms and the campus itself. I think most of us remember more about our friends than we do our teachers. So I think that the challenge really here is unique. But I think the opportunity is also that, okay, now it's a global world. I think Dr. Strickland's point about the outreach that Fletcher has, the presence that it can have. And then how do we then leverage that toward the next step? Because as architects, we're always thinking about what's the next thing? How do we make this better? And we can talk more about that as we go forward in those terms and how it impacts physical design as we see it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think that's a real critical point that, all of this, whether you are, public, private, community college, HBCU, we're all going through this at the same time together. Previously, I could go out on a listserv and put a question to the colleague to say, hey, how have you dealt with this in the past? But now everybody's going through this together, so there's really no best practice, no playbook for dealing with a lot of these. So we are in some ways kind of building the plane as we fly, I think, so.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. And David, to your point about culture, we talk about that in, workplace, I think it's a strong sort of pillar in education. And also the comment about, how much collaboration, interaction, and information is absorbed through a virtual platform as opposed to getting everyone around the table or in a room together. I'd love to hear from you, John, on, how you're planning on maintaining that culture and that sense of community and sort of balancing that with the technology that you're using?
You know, such a significant part of the campus experience and the college experience is face-to-face, and it's being on a campus, and it's interacting, and it's social, and all of those things. So for a lot of our students all over the country, this has been a really challenging period. I kind of look forward and to think, to Kristine's point, technology's created some real access opportunities that maybe we didn't have before. We just had, we're second day of classes, our orientation program and play fair and all these welcome week activities. We've doubled the number of students participating. And so that's the technology, that's the opportunity. At the same time, we can't just have it all be virtual. So to David's point, there is something really valuable and significant about the face-to-face experience. So I see us working to sustain a combination of those things, where it's flexible, right? What works for one person may not work for another. And the fact that we have the technology and the hybrid and high flex capabilities really does support a much broader population. Over the summer, we put technology in about 80 to 85 classrooms that will allow, you know, one day a student attends a class in person, on Wednesday they're in the residence hall, and on Friday they're going to sit out at the lakefront and take the course. And that's just, I think, a fantastic opportunity, whether the students living here or the students in another state. And we really do need to continue to make sure that, in order to make sure that access to education grows.
I think I could argue that I would learn better at the lakefront as well, or at the beach. Absolutely. I think there's that balance there. And Greg, I was curious, as you were talking about, you know, sort of the all hands on approach as you start to get your campus ready, and you now have your staff mixing chemicals together to make sure we have sanitizer. What is sort of your, you know, keeping that long-term vision in place with the master planning and some of the future initiatives is, you know, how are y'all balancing that? And one of the other, you know, hot topics before COVID was campus safety initiatives, especially with active shooter, where we needed to sort of lock down, you know, actually make spaces smaller and lock down. Now we're needing them to be open. You know, how are y'all balancing that?
That's very interesting. We've got a few projects in the works that have been in design prior to any of this happening. The specifics about how we would change something significantly, we don't think that we are going to. From the entire campus, we have a consciousness that has to be raised. The idea, the fact that we are wearing masks now, and people, at least so far, the freshmen, seem to be understanding the importance of that. We'll see how it goes as it comes on. But I think that we learn as we go. The reality is that nobody knew that we needed to wear a mask in February or March. The norms are going to change. It's going to be accepted. I think that masks are going to become much more of a fashion statement, and somebody's going to find an elegant solution to them. But it's more about personal responsibility and behavior that we have to rely on. We have to rely on that now. If we were dealing with a long-term situation like this, you might end up with plexiglass between students at a common table. But I don't know that we're going to have to go that far. But things will definitely change in the future, and we're actually still anticipating that we don't know what we're going to be seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Greg. Ralph, I wanted to, since you're over finance for Dillard, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you know, this disruption that we've faced, obviously, with traditional revenue generating models. And is there any planning in place for creating diversifying revenue models and having a more resilient sort of business plan?
Sure. As I said a little earlier, as we're coming back to campus now, we have a little bit of a better idea of what our enrollment is going to look like. But part of that has been a shift in what that enrollment looks like. Again, with a lot of it being face-to-face, now we've seen a higher percentage of our students being online. So there's a different cost, a different revenue associated with that. We don't receive the room and board associated with students who are totally online. So, we have to factor that into the budget, into our cash flow projections going forward as well too. But at the same time, I think, as one of the panelists mentioned, it is an opportunity for us to kind of expand. And, the key part of it, for us, and I'm sure for others too, is the value aspect of it. I think, there is that discussion. Students want to know, well, if I'm fully online, why am I paying the same price as a student who would be there in person at Dillard? There should be some kind of discount associated with that. So, it's our job to prove that you are still receiving that value as a student of Dillard University, whether you are here or whether you are, someplace else outside of New Orleans, outside of Louisiana. So, that'll be key for us. But yeah, we're also using this time frame to, look at efficiencies. There were a lot of manual processes, or several manual processes, that I think that when, COVID struck, we quickly had to convert those to automated processes. So there are cost savings associated with that. So we try and build those in as we plan to going forward. But this will be a key time for us, I think, to look at that model of business for higher education. And there's certainly going to be some changes that are going to be required for that model.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ralph. Kristine, we've talked a lot about the students, but I was curious in terms of faculty, because we've had to sort of shift their practices as well. As what is sort of this new approach having an impact on your teachers, your faculty, and how they're delivering that curriculum?
Sure. So, big changes. And I will say, a few weeks ago, somebody said, how is everybody doing? And I said, when I talked to my faculty, they were so excited to come back to campus, to be back in classrooms with students, but yet they were nervous, and there was some anxiousness, and we had laid out a lot of plans during the summer, and then as we got closer, and a little bit, then more anxiety rose. We found that we were having to make adjustments. So we tried to do for our faculty what we did for our students, and that was to provide them with the options that they needed so that they felt safe. So for faculty who felt that for them it was not necessarily safe to be back in the classroom, we've worked to move their classes entirely online so that we can continue to have them engaged with our college and engaged with our students. For those, we had some who said, give me everything in person, like I'm ready, masks in hand, running towards the building. And so we've been able to accommodate that as well. For some, it was really working hard to get them up to speed on some of the technology. And so we've brought in some resources to help them adjust and move their content online. But it's even some of the smaller things, again, kind of going back to some of our technical programs, it's hard to say, we need everybody around a particular piece of machinery or around a vehicle or around an air conditioner in our HVAC program and not have people within that 6-foot radius. So, we have our faculty right now setting alarms on their phones so that at a 10-minute mark, they know they have to put some distance between them and their students so that we don't go over that 15 minutes, within the 6 feet for close contact. So it really has changed how we think about the delivery as well. One of the interesting things for us was that back in the March, April timeframe, we were asked to continue the education of certain essential personnel. And so for us, a lot of that was, how do we safely take care of our faculty and our students? So, making smaller groups. And the impact that had on our faculty many times was expanding the amount of lecture time, right, that they had to do, because we would say, we'll bring in this half and then this half. And we're seeing the same with this now, even on the hybrid side, is faculty who maybe are teaching content more frequently throughout the week, just to make sure that they're hitting all the students. And so it's certainly not without its challenges, but I think, one of the things that I would say is our faculty have been just amazing in transitioning. In the spring when we took a break and we had a 1 week turnaround to get all of our classes online, and I didn't hear one complaint. Nobody said, oh, I can't do this. It was just such a can-do attitude, and we're seeing the same thing again this fall.
That's wonderful. Really, I think it's again, creating that greater sense of community when everyone has to come together for a common goal. David, I was curious to hear from you as these teaching methods are constantly evolving, and the idea of space, of how we're sort of supporting that. You've traveled abroad quite a bit. You mentioned your work in China. Are there any strategies that you've seen deployed effectively abroad, or maybe in other industries, that we can borrow here within our region?
Well, I think it's important that we realize the region we're in, and that we need to play into or respect or work with the needs of our region. The oil and water aspect of the thing. We can't, every place has its own different markets and different needs to educate the students. Because, the wonderful thing about education is it's always about the future. I think the work in China is interesting because, when we say we didn't think about this until March or something, well, I was in Japan in late January and we were already wearing masks and I was miserable. It was coming. So the work in China, we have a new school, international school for about 2,700 kids from scratch. And, the proposition there I think may be relevant, which is that it's a Chinese garden. And the interesting thing about a Chinese garden is it relies buildings on outdoors. It's a codependency. And I think this, we start out by saying, well, really, we shouldn't be shutting all these windows with no ventilation. We need ventilation. It's just basic practical things. But we can think much more broadly than that. I think when we hear about the students going out into the lake, you want to go study at the lakefront, Rebecca, but, under the tree, it can be said that the tree was the first classroom where the teacher was outdoors. I think the connection to the outdoors is vital. And I think the engineered way of walling out nature makes us sick. Nature is kind of miraculous because it doesn't really harden us, and much of the technology does. I had some Chinese students in the office, maybe it was early January, and they were talking about 5G, technology. And I was saying, well, you should also maybe think about the Tao and the way of life and nature, because I think that we have to prepare people, but we can't just prepare them for the technical side of things. We got to prepare them to live. And I think this is the test we have. How do we make whole people out of this? How do we make people care about one another? Because when we talk about personal responsibility, well, it's toward each other. And I think that fracture in our society is what we see in America, our weakness in America. And we don't have this government that forces us all to behave a certain way like the Chinese or the Japanese, who comport themselves according to convention. But I really think that it's nature. And, when I think about us living in South Louisiana, and we're living in this strange delta with the Gulf of Mexico right next to us, and that's the need. That's the market. And that's really our campus, I think. And so we try to expand the idea of the campus outside the building, and then the campus into the community, and then the community into the broader city, and then the city into the region into the world.
Excellent, David. I think that's certainly a silver lining coming out of this event. I'd love to hear from some of our other panelists. I know we've heard some other silver linings is being able to have a broader reach. I also imagine that we'd be able to bring additional talent and learning opportunities from around the world to our students here and faculty here now that technology, again, is more widely accepted. So would love to hear from the other panelists on any other silver linings that you've seen during your planning during this time.
I have a comment. David mentioned it. Ralph mentioned it. The students. The question that Ralph posed, or the thing that he said was that you're not necessarily going to get revenue from people that are all online. I've talked to many parents who said, my child's a freshman and nothing is going to stop them from being on campus. And all of their classes are online and they are still on campus. They want to be there. They need to be there. That the whole social aspect of being there is huge for them. So that has been exciting. And the fact that we do have a lot of, at LSU, a lot of shade space, a lot of trees to be outside underneath. People will be taking an advantage of that, and we're encouraging that. And our Wi-Fi is accessible outside. So technology and nature somehow have to work together, and we have to continually improve it.
I'll expand just a little bit on that. You know, we talked about one of the silver linings being accessibility and engagement and engaging more people regionally and around the country. But I think one of the things we learned in the spring is that there's an equity issue, particularly around technology. And there's always been an equity issue on who has access to higher ed. And so to Greg's point, I don't think, at least at the University of New Orleans, we're not going to make the same mistake, and I'll call it a mistake, that we made in the spring, where we sent students home. Keeping students, unless they want to go home, right? But we need to stay open and provide students without access to technology and Wi-Fi and so on. We need to allow them to stay. We're fully online for the first 8 days, and then we're going to ease into our face-to-face and hybrid. But my residence hall is packed, following all the protocols. They're in the dining facility. And again, it kind of goes back to that college experience. Even if it's online, they need access, and it's more equitable to have them in this kind of sphere.
Yeah, I was going to echo the same thing, and I know it may not be something that you would necessarily think is a silver lining, but I think it is, and 100% on the equity issue. You know, we're in a rural area, and I think that in many ways there were a lot of assumptions out there prior to this whole experience about access, about ability with technology. And I think many of us, probably within the higher education community and even beyond that, had this belief that, you know, smartphone in every family or every hand, that there was this real knowledge base around utilization of that technology. And I think the silver lining for me in all of this is it gave us a chance to pause and to reset and to realize that there were those who were being left behind. And I don't know that we would have taken, or we would have had an opportunity to pause like we have to assess. You know, we sent out a survey in the spring, and I was, you know, first surprised at the number of students who took the time to answer it, but then surprised at the results as well, with the lack of access, the lack of technology in their family, or competing demands for that laptop, with kids and other folks at home, all trying to access that. And so it's really given my leadership team an opportunity to say, how do we do this better moving forward? And what does that look like, you know, for students who were literally during the pandemic coming and parking in our parking lot so that they could get access to the Wi-Fi to finish up their spring semester. So I think the silver lining for us is the ability to make sure that we're being inclusive moving forward and really taking into account all the different circumstances and not just what we think we know.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kristine on that. You just, you do make those assumptions that, you know, everybody is on a level playing field, and that may not, and that's probably not the case. I mean, we know for a fact that, you know, being on Dillard's campus, you know, for a lot of our students is probably a better situation than what they may be dealing with at home. You know, if you got, you know, 3 square meals a day, you've got Wi-Fi, you've got a roof over your head, you know, some of those things, and you don't know sometimes all the challenges that students are dealing with. So, you know, we want to make sure that we can make that available to all of our students and bringing them back in that type of environment. So I think it's really important, you know, both as John and Kristine said, some of that access, we want to make sure everybody is able to access, you know, the services that we provide.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. I think we're going to turn to our audience. I think we have a time for about 1 to 2 questions. I'll invite Carolyn Hayes to jump in and ping us with a question.
Hello, panelists. Thank you so much for your insights. This has been incredibly informative. I'm going to start off with a question that speaks to many of the sentiments that y'all have just brought up about the student experience. This says, Greg makes an excellent point earlier. I'm immensely impressed with the physical and technological solutions universities have developed, but I'm doubtful about our ability to enforce or encourage safe behavior among students, especially off campus. What are your institutions doing in that regard?
I can chime in because I can tell you every president and chancellor in the country is sitting on the edge of their seat, right, Kristine, and wondering about this issue. We've put our protocols in our student code of conduct and our employee code of conduct. And so they are enforceable. Now, I message multiple times per week. I do a lot of social media, trying to help our students understand that I appreciate that you want the normal experience, but the rest of the semester hinges on your ability to follow these protocols. So if you want to go down to here, the boot, and maybe I shouldn't have said that, but that's where a lot of the region's students hang out. It will impact your ability to finish the term here and potentially others. It also impacts your family and friends. We are all going to have COVID on our campuses. That shouldn't be a surprise. But we can control spread as a community and making sure that our students are accountable and have self-responsibility to keep others safe. I've been asked, can I call the police, right? Can I enforce this? I don't think that's the solution. In my mind, the solution has been that we respect one another enough to make sure our semester continues. So there's a lot of peer pressure, positive peer pressure, to do this right. And I've seen it. In fact, I saw it this morning. I walked in front of our enrollment center, one student with a mask below the nose. And I was prepared to say something, but fortunately, 2 other students walked up and said, you know, that doesn't work. So talking to each other and making sure they understand the requirements is probably our biggest tool. But at the same time, I'll say, look around the country, you're seeing places where it fell apart. And it fell apart quick. And we don't want to be one of those. So it's going to be interesting next few weeks.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, as a commuter institution, right, we know that our students are leaving campus and interacting in their communities, and maybe or maybe not taking precautions. But I think it goes back to what John said in terms of continuing to encourage behavior that says we need to protect our community and we need to protect the ability to stay in class. And I think that's the message. We have an app that we use that asks students to self-certify anytime they come on campus, you know, if they're symptom-free. And that, I think, what part of that too is just a daily reminder. I mean, I agree. I don't think there's any way to keep COVID off of our campuses. You know, I think if that was possible, we'd have the solution to this whole thing. So I think it's going to happen. But for me, the other part of it is, you know, that reminder to students, but also just saying that we have to protect each other. And that's what's really at the end of the day important. It's not about fines. It's not about punishment. It's about moving ahead in a way that keeps people safe.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with those comments as well too. You know, and just adding on to that, you know, when you start to get that buy-in from faculty, staff, and students, that really helps the process as well. You know, just like, you know, Dillard is built on a lot of traditions. And, you know, one of our traditions, if you've been here and seen our campus, is that, you know, we generally have our commencement outside on that day, on graduation day. And the students actually march down the Avenue of the Oaks to receive their degree from our president, Dr. Kimbrell. So, you know, the students, especially seniors, but other ones as well too, have said, hey, look, don't mess this up for me. I want to march down the Avenue of the Oaks in May. So yeah, let's everybody do their part so that we can all participate in that ceremony. So that really helps when you get that kind of buy-in, I think, from the students as well. But everybody, you know, has got to chip in for sure.
I mean, this is the teaching moment, right? This is the opportunity we have. We became fractured as a country. The media sends everybody into their own fantasy of what's true, but this thing tends to ignore all that misinformation. So I think that it's sort of put to us in the U.S. or something like that at this point. I also think it's important to reflect that we do ignore a great segment of our fellows in our society, and for this conjunction of events, because it's not really just about the coronavirus. It's about the other awarenesses that we have in our country that have been repressed and rise. But it's really, you know, I already referred to the Tao. It's really, you know, I might as well be Christian and say, others, Lord, yes, others. Let this our motto be. We have to think about other people. I mean, what's the point of living on earth as just individual? And I think that's what this is really calling out. We have to live together.
Very well said, David. All about respect for people. Carolyn, do you want to hit us with one more question?
Yeah, I think this question speaks to actually a couple that have come through, and maybe a great way to wrap up looking far into the future. It was directed to David, but I know that there may be some input from the other panelists. There's a lot of discussion about possible long-term changes in the workplace due to work from home requirements over the past few months and the perceived success in productivity working from home. It's probably way too early to know what long-term effects this might have on K-12 and higher education, but do you see fundamental changes in the way education environments will be designed going forward?
Well, and there should be changes. I think that you know, architects think we don't have the best profile as earners, but we have the great educational model of the design studio, Greg. You know what I mean? We all work together in these places, and it's project-based learning. Well, project-based learning doesn't want a lot of classrooms. Our school in China, we can't call the areas classrooms except for the government to review how much daylight gets into these spaces, because they really want different scales of space for different groups of people. And so I see there being a less rigid format if you in the way that things are laid out. I said already things about ventilation. I think we've underestimated that. Daylight, ventilation. I think that the basic mission still has to be questioned. What are we trying to do? We're trying to teach a person to fish, so we need to learn about the fisheries, whatever the metaphor would be. But I do think the campus becomes now more important. I mean, you know, the Oaks at LSU or the Oaks at Dillard really become vital. And I think that's also a positive. We've got to go back and value that. You know, architects, we only work 5 feet outside the building line, which is insanity, because it's just not the way to think about it. So I think about, and I also think that a pitch for AOS, I think a lot of the interiors are really going to be furnishings, because I think the fixed elements, the walls are in our way, and you're basically going to be providing structure, space, stairs, and systems. And then it's going to be more flexible in the future.
I would just echo that. It's interesting for me. I'm actually in the process in 3 different stages of building 3 new buildings. And throughout this, I've thought, why am I building more buildings, right? if everybody's going to be working from home and virtual, and we know that there's still that space, but for us, we're having a lot more conversations about outdoor classroom space being built on the campus, and being really intentional about that, and making sure that faculty have access and students have access to outdoor educational space as well as the interior space, and then about the flexibility. I think that that's one of the lessons that we've learned from before, and even more emphasis now on, is that we don't know what education will look like in 10, 20, 30 years from now. And you know, many of us who have had the joy of being in old buildings know that they've oftentimes been reconstructed over and over again for whatever the learning methodology was at the time, and it's just difficult. So, you know, building with the idea that in 5 or 10 years something needs to look different, or it will need to look different, I think is critical. And I agree with that, the comment about the interior space, and more about fixtures and furnishings and things that provide that flexibility, so that, you know, I can tell you, one of our facilities, the faculty all came and said, we want this auditorium. The auditorium is our #1 wish list. And when we start talking about why would we put in permanent auditorium structures where that room can be used for nothing else other than that, but could we get there with furnishings and have the same type of environment, but then it could be flipped to something else. And so those are the conversations I think we're having right now as we come out of this, and not just building as well, you know, 17,000 offices. We've scaled back a lot on our office space, and we're looking at more shared drop-in space than we were private offices for every single person who's employed by the college.
Yeah, and along those same lines, it certainly has an impact on, you know, the university's budget for me as well too, because, you know, previously we bought furniture, like you said, Kristine, kind of for the long haul, but now I'm starting to get requests, especially from the student affairs area. Students, you know, they're looking for that kind of furniture that before it was, you know, meant to bring people face to face, but now it's furniture that it keeps conversation open, but maybe not necessarily in a face-to-face kind of way. So, you know, I'm starting to see those kind of expenditure requests coming in. So, you know, just working with those various departments, you know, to provide the resources that they'll need in order for those changes that, you know, will have an effect on the way we, you know, on the education side, but also on the, you know, student affairs, student success side as well.
Well, thank you all very much, and thank you to our participants who sent in their questions. If we didn't get them answered today, we will try to include that in our follow-up post the discussion. I want to take this time to thank every single one of you. I know that you've had a very hectic 4 months, so taking 1 hour of your day today means a lot to our group and our community. So thank you again. I think the moral of this is that everyone has been incredibly flexible, nimble, resilient, and has an optimistic view of what higher education looks like in our community. So I thank you all for being very creative leaders with that effort. So with that, I'll just plug our next discussion, which will be next month, where we're going to discuss the resiliency in the healthcare industry, which will be a big topic for everyone. But thank you again, and have a nice Friday.
Thank you.
Bye.